Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Welcome aboard, lovely radical. Nice to have you back on the Life Unrestricted podcast. We are here to set ourselves free. Free from the highly dogmatic chains that diet culture has us in or had us in, all those years in which we unquestioningly did what we thought we had to do. Because what the movies, magazines, and the whole advertisement industry showed us was so much not like us that we thought our bodies were quote-unquote flawed, too soft, too big, too, as I often said, broken. That's bad. We were asleep in a way, asleep to the fact that not even the models look like the models, let alone the vast majority of people of this world. We were also asleep to the fact that entire industries made, and I wish I was joking, billions and billions of dollars a year off of us feeling inadequate, less than, or even ugly. We didn't see how profitable that concept is. I mean, make someone believe they are inferior and they'll buy anything with a promise to fix whatever was labeled wrong, not good enough, not beautiful enough, not tight enough, not hip enough or thin enough. Thank God we are awake now, right? We see that we do in fact have a choice, that we can set ourselves free, and that we can be rebels against something that tells us we need to be smaller and lower maintenance and younger and sweeter. Excuse my French, but fuck that noise. Enough of that. What the world really needs is you. You, unapologetic, untamed, real, wonderful, just as you are, because you are wonderful. No need to change you in any way. You're worthy. So why, you ask, is it so hard to let something so silly go? I mean, we lifted the veil of this harmful diet culture BS, yet we, or at least I sometimes, we are still not totally at ease with the idea of letting the ideal go. It doesn't take an over-analyzing mind like mine to figure out that there's something going on beneath the surface level. If it didn't, we'd all just go right ahead and stick it to the idea of trying to look a certain way, to deprive ourselves, to feel body shame, to treat ourselves like an afterthought. This must be about something deeper. And it's about a really deep fear, I think, a deep fear of rejection, a fear of vulnerability, and a fear of uncertainty. That's what I found out it is about for myself. And let me tell you, I don't like that fact. But it became obvious that I have been hiding behind this quest for a quote-unquote acceptable thin and fit body. Because the more I obsessed about it, the less I actually lived. Even though that I had thought that I would live more once I looked a certain way. But the more I obsessed, the less I connected to others, even though I desperately wanted to be loved and accepted. The more I obsessed, the less I had time for creativity, like this podcast, for example, even though I had 10,000 creative ideas when I was younger. The more I obsessed, the less I actually liked my body or felt connected to my sensuality, even though I had thought losing weight would bring me great confidence in wild sex. But no. So down the drain they went, the great life plans, the great relationships, or the possibility of leaving a meaningful imprint while I'm on this earth. For 20 years, I somehow thought I would do all that once I had that body. because we're only entitled to real happiness when we do, right? Ha ha. In the end, I was stuck with maintenance of said body, an uphill battle that only increases as time passes, as we know, because bodies want homeostasis. What we put them through is an emergency to them. They fight back. They fight for us, really. But we don't want to see it that way, and we feel betrayed by our bodies, our vehicles to be embodied on this earth. We feel betrayed when our body starts to slow down our metabolism, when it gets tired, when our hormones get out of whack, when the cellulite doesn't want to disappear. Isn't this sad? I mean, apart from that, if you're doing this long enough, you might, just as I did, end up not sleeping right anymore with weak bones, tripled anxiety, and horrible mood swings. So I can only speak for myself, but really, what once was a really fun-loving, outgoing, creative, yet chubby girl became a thin, fit, anxious, isolated, obsessed, lonely, rigid, and slightly compulsive woman whose heart slowly, quietly started freezing. I certainly didn't want to wake up from all that because I was so determined. But as we know, the universe will continuously knock you on your head if you don't listen. And one day, for you, I hope that sooner rather than later, you will find yourself questioning if what you're doing is really making any sense. Are you really going to be safer in the world with 20 pounds less? Are you really going to find deeper love or happiness there? Hint, no, you won't. All that's going to happen is that time will pass you by. Time that will be lost. If I truly think about the last 10 years and think about those regrets from dying people that I told you about in the last episode, my heart gets quite heavy. No one will clap their hand when we die, and all we can say is that we really tried hard to be thin. So maybe this is a bit of a motivation to start living life according to your rules, just a little more every day. To take the first small steps toward a life where you'll be remembered for something so much greater and more meaningful than your perishable outer shell. I have started the journey back to my own life, my own truth, and I'm just learning now how to accept my body the way it is and stop punishing and manipulating it like an unruly child. I don't want to live like a thinness prisoner and miss out the best parts of life, messy as it is. I don't want that. So let's do this together, shall we? It's easier and so much more fun together. So by the way, if you want to join my beautiful Facebook group where I try to lift your spirits and throw some real body positivity at you, join in. We're ready for you. You'll find the link on my website, lifeunrestricted.org/join. lifeunrestricted.org/join. And before we start, I have another exciting announcement. Because a few weeks ago, someone called me out on my inner gremlin talk, and here's how it went. There was a woman, she asked me whether I had already set up a Patreon page, which is a site where people can support projects like this podcast. So, well, she asked if I had put my podcast up on this Patreon page, so that I wouldn't ruin myself financially doing this podcast, since, you know, podcasts are free. And I, really not having a lot of money at all, said, no, I can't ask for money. That would be weird. And she said, stop it right there. Are you saying you're not worthy of being supported? And that shut me right up, because she was right. It was exactly what I believed deep down. So I challenged myself and set up this Patreon page, and I kindly ask you to support my show with a pledge. If you find my content valuable, I'd love for you to show some support so that I can keep this up. You can do this via patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. So that's patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. And Patreon spells PATREON. patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. I will make sure to give you a big shout out here. My very first big thank you goes to Rob from Australia. She was the first to pledge. And Rob, really, you are awesome. And your generosity is really, really wonderful and much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you so much. But before I tear up, let's move on to today's episode, okay? In this episode of the Life Unrestricted podcast, you are going to hear Tracy Brown from Naples, Florida. She's a nutrition therapist, registered licensed dietitian, and somatic attuned eating coach who has offered counseling in private practice since 2006. She specializes in treatment of eating disorders and eating problems for both adults and children, and she also routinely teaches intuitive eating workshops and disordered eating related talks in the North Central Florida area, including Santa Fe College and Flagler College, St. Augustine, Florida. When we started chatting, I confessed to her that I was, as always, a little nervous before calling her.
You know what? I still get nervous a little bit before each new appointment, like new patient or client, and definitely doing these talks, even though I've done it many, many times. So that must mean we care a lot, right?
Yeah. And I was a radio DJ forever. So even after all these years, I still get nervous when I have to talk to people like, oh, I'm going to forget everything. You know, just the normal insecurities, I think.
Yeah. And when it happens to me, I just say, okay, it's okay to be nervous. That's normal. And I know enough. At least I hope.
And I took a look at your website yesterday. And so I just remembered, why don't I just take a deep breath before I call her? Wow, why don't I ground myself right now? This is not a bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never a bad idea. Whatever practices we have for grounding, that's good for all of us. Probably we should all do it probably multiple times a day, and we're still pretty conditioned to keep going though. So
we'll get into that, I'm sure. So
yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for being on my show. It's so great that you could make time for me. Thank you.
Oh, of course. And yeah, thank you for inviting me, having me. One of my favorite things in the world to do is just visit with people, especially obviously around these topics, because we all need to know we're not alone in this stuff, no matter how long we've been at it. So
totally, that's what helps me the most. When I was alone or feeling alone in this, I didn't get any further, and now I'm making big steps just because I can talk to people, and I have my Facebook group, and I see women coming together and sharing experiences is one of the most beautiful things there are, I think. So why don't you go ahead, and so that everybody can get to know you a little better, why don't you share your story with us?
Sure. Okay. Well, my name's Tracy Brown, and gosh, we're all so many things, right? So I'm a wife, I'm a mother. So before even the professional stuff, this is my 20th year since I started recovery from disordered eating. This would be about this time 20 years ago exactly, which is strange that time is going by. But yeah, so I struggled with definitely restrictive, very, very, very restrictive eating, and then back and forth with chronic dieting and some binging with that, and compulsive exercise.
What got you into all this restriction mode?
For me, I never had any overt, like, something's wrong particularly with your body, but as a highly sensitive person and pretty empathic, is that I saw the rules pretty quickly by the time I was very little about, like, don't be too much, and don't be too bright and shiny, and be really good at stuff, but don't be too big a deal. And I really didn't take in the message like that thinner was better, and probably until I was about 8 or 9. And not because anything was, again, criticized about my body, but I just saw the grown-up women around me, noticing that, like, they're on diets and they're doing these things and they seem really miserable, and they talk about, like, I can't eat this or I can't eat that, or I can only be happy if I just lost this 20 pounds and wear a size 10, then I could be happy. And so the seed was planted there, like, oh, to be a grown-up woman, I need to be smaller. And that's just the way it is, or otherwise you won't be happy. So these weren't eating disordered women in my life. These were people that just were part of what were culturally, at least westernized, that, like, smaller is better no matter what. It doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't matter what you go through. It doesn't matter. That's just how you have to be acceptable. So again, there's a seed planted there. And I just think about all the different components of, like, what got me here. Okay, so part of my personality, part of the environment, and perfectionism and harm avoidance and wanting to be good to all people at all times. and also some family dynamic stuff of like, I have a very good and loving family, but they don't do emotions. So it makes it really difficult when you're an emotional, highly sensitive person and you're feeling your emotions and everybody else's emotions and you don't know what in is up. So you start to like just put all that away because it's too much.
I relate to that a lot because I think I was a really, really oversensitive kid as well. And I still to this day can feel the energy in almost every room. And like, I feel like I know how people are feeling. And sometimes this can be overwhelming, but I've not tied the knot back to dieting and that being a way of also numbing out the feelings. So you see a connection there?
For me personally, definitely, because that was always around before the restriction ever happened. I never even thought about like food in terms of like food groups or calories or anything like that. Even though I saw little pieces, my mom or my grandma dieting, I'm like, whatever, that's what they're doing. Even though I recognized it was almost like, again, like a seed planted and it got put away. And not until I got to high school that, again, I was 16, I started restricting after a couple of breakups of, again, another place of, this is just my experience, I would say, that like, then you come into that coming of age in high school where it's like you want to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, and there's some expectations about what a good one is. And I wasn't willing to go all the way, let's just put it that way. And that led to like, oh, I thought they really cared about me. Well, they don't really. And so that was just a devastating thing for me too, to like have all these other ways in which I was trying to be so good and so perfect, but that it wasn't going to be enough. So I had this like it was honestly a moment of, I'm over it, literally F it in my mind. I don't want to be here. I don't want to deal with this world. If this is the way people treat each other and it's going to be, I'm done. And I started restricting and it went downhill really quickly, which ended me up like a year and a half later in the hospital. And so
it was really bad.
It was pretty bad and very, dramatic and traumatic and all that. And, but, I had the will definitely to live because I recognized when I got there, like, oh gosh, I mean, this could go on as forever. This could be it. And,
did you realize that at that early age? Wow.
I did. I was 18. So wow. By that point, again, I think that goes back to the high sensitivity. I was a pretty spiritual person, even though not particularly one thing. The funny thing is that, I also happened to be in a facility that wasn't all that awesome. So they had all kinds of people of all different kinds of struggles there. And it was actually somewhat violent. It was a weird, bad situation. So it scared the crap out of me. It's like, I got to get out of here and get well. And it wasn't a scared straight moment, but a little bit of like, and not most treatment facilities aren't like that anymore, or definitely the good ones who help with eating disorders aren't like that. But I happened to end up somewhere like that, and that was my version of what treatment looked like. So I'm done with this. This is hell.
That
I'm
sounds awful. Yeah,
it was awful.
Did they make you do stuff?
Oh no, it was just refeeding. There wasn't really much like very good therapeutic work. It was just refeeding, but they had people there in in detox situations, and they had people there, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but basically people very very poorly treated from mental illness perspective. So just a lot of chaos going on that was scary for a kid off the farm,
of course,
and the country. So anyway, that was my version of like, I can't be this sick because I can't stay here, and I can't go home doing what I was doing. So I was doing therapy after that, and this had kind of got me down the path what I'm on. It actually is being a registered dietitian now. Is that one of the saving graces I had was a dietitian who, at that time, there really wasn't like even the verbiage of intuitive eating. There was either dietitians, but here's a meal plan, have a nice day, and not knocking people personally for that. I'm just saying that wouldn't have been helpful for me. But she was somebody that had studied a little bit of like the Ellen Satter's work and Janine Roth, and so there wasn't a structured here's let's get you refed and let's do some intuitive eating and body image work. This was like like there's no good or bad food, right? And and you could eat 3 rolls a day if you want to, right? And like really? I can? And it rocked my world. It's like, oh, like, yeah, food wasn't always this crazy for me. And what you're stating sounds like when I was 5. Oh, huh, okay. It wasn't that easy. It took me years to fully do all that. But because that was such a big change for me, then I'd heard in my head the last 2-3 years that I just kind of got the ball rolling, and lots of in and out therapy. Again, I really didn't find a good match therapy wise, because I really needed very compassionate, I can feel my feelings and not feel shame about that approach versus very, very analytic. So that ended up helping me better longer down the road. But anyway, so here I am graduating high school and I'm going to go to school to be a dietitian because of the woman, that helped me. And by the way, I was still in both worlds. So I'm doing this okay, there's got to be a better way to live with food but still one foot in my own craziness too, of restricting and over exercising and binging in there too. And, I just for me, I learned a lot on my own, unfortunately. So it took a lot of years, 4 to 5 years to get to the place where it's I can't control my body through all these ways that either I hear out in the world or even through school. So I had to start recognizing that I can over exercise isn't making me the body I think I should be. My body wants to be what it wants to be. And the less I eat and the more I move, the more I binge. And so that was a connection for me at some point, is that I was having so much deprivation driven eating that the restricting is what was triggering the binging. And when I finally made that connection, I'm like, oh my gosh, all the foods I'm eating through my binging are exactly the places that are too sparse in my everyday eating. So the carbs and the fat that I was restricting is what I would binge on. And when I finally made that connection, the intuitive eating piece started to make sense to me. By that time, the book was out and all that. So I had a hold of that as well. So anyway, as I'm going, this is all evolving as I'm in school. And the longer I was in my undergrad for nutrition and dietetics, I was like, okay, how in the world am I going to teach about nutrition and quote unquote good or bad food, and that your weight has to be a problem if it's a certain weight, when I'm actually healing myself with a totally different approach.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? So I graduated with this degree of so I just have 4 years of learning a whole lot of stuff that was really, obviously I know a lot about nutrition and how things work with the body, but I don't have a way to help people learn how to be saner with their food and actually maybe even make any food changes in a non-punitive, judging, critical kind of way. So that was the next journey of working as well as training to learn how to be a nutrition therapist. And that I ended up had a great mentor. I worked with her for a really long time, and she had experience of doing this work for a really long time. And that's kind of where things for me now professionally have evolved, is I'm pretty 100% intuitive eating and health at every size. And I'm very, trauma informed and do a lot of somatic work, body work with people. And just talking about this as much as I can to let people know that you can be your own nutrition and food expert. You don't need the ever-changing fads and advice of whatever's out there depending on the decade you're in, and that you don't have a bad body. And speaking, I think what I feel like are these truths, and is compassionate and supportive way as possible to people, because it's hard making the paradigm shift.
And I think we all need to hear that our bodies are okay, because we've been hearing the exact opposite all our lives. And as you said, it took you quite some time to let go of the skinny ideal, because that's what's kind of driving the whole thing. Why else would we be so brutal with ourselves? So that's the internalized fat phobia sort of piece that I find is only addressed in body image work, which is the hardest piece of it all. And now I understand why everybody says it's not about the food. So how did you let go of that?
It was hard. I'll tell you, there was, I can tell you a defining moment. I was, again, I don't remember the year. We're talking a good, at least 12 years ago. I remember I was, had some kind of job in between undergraduate and my internship. And it was one of those jobs where unfortunately I had too much time on my hands to think about How am I going to restrict?
Yeah.
And so I remember, again, I've been doing this for many, many years. So I was recognizing that, again, all the foods that I was, at this point, I really wasn't binging as much. It was more about like I would come home like starving and like I wanted to eat well and eat a variety of food and enjoy my food. But I always had this plan of how I'm not going to eat carbs at dinner. And I kept finding like, okay, I won't eat carbs for dinner, but then I would eat like a full roll of like Chips Ahoy chewy cookies after dinner. And so it wasn't a full out binge, but it was so much deprivation driven eating. And I was starting to see like, I do this every day. Why do I do this every day? And I could look back at my little piece of notebook paper with all my little plan on it for all my protein and veggies I was going to try to only eat. And I was like, oh, well, nutritionally, I know that like, okay, so I need all these macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat. And I'm eating basically no carbohydrates to speak of all day long. So of course, I'm going to be deprived for that set of macronutrient at some point in the day. And it's going to happen when I'm more tired because you only have so much quote unquote willpower a day, and your body's going to want that food whether your belief system likes it or not. Mm-hmm. So that's what started. And the piece with the body image with that is recognizing that like, so what would happen if I ate carbs during the daytime? And so my old, diet mentality brain would say, well, you're just going to gain like 30 pounds. And I said, what would actually happen if I gained 30 pounds? Like what would change? And I looked at my husband. He was my husband at that time. We were early on in our being married. Would he go? No. Would I lose my degree? No. Would I lose this job? No. Would my family and the friends that care about me like hate me, leave me? No. So what is it that I'm afraid is going to happen? And I kind of recognized like the things that probably mattered to me a lot weren't going to change. Would the whole cultural love and accept me? No. And that felt like a lot of grief, but mm-hmm. I was just sick and tired. I was willing to like, I don't have to love my body, but maybe I can hate it less enough to like change my eating a little bit, just shift it and see what happens. I'm willing to take the risk at this point. And so what came along with the body image stuff is, recognizing where I was exercising to change my body. So I would start, trying to focus on, okay, strength more versus like either being ripped or being skinny, and seeing that like, oh, some days I do want to move. It's just some days I don't want to do as much or as intense, or I want to do different things. And doing that didn't change my body. So for me, everything was very much a trial by error of like, I started loving my body the more I started treating it with just some respect of like, even if it stays the same or it gets bigger, I can't keep living this way because it's torture. So it didn't come with like, oh, I love my body, it's beautiful. For me, it just kind of was the acceptance of this is where I'm going to be. And I don't have to like it, just stop trying to change it. So at least I can get my food better, be more of an intuitive eater, which I did that. When I made that decision, intuitive eating came pretty fast just because I'd stopped trying to manipulate the body. It doesn't mean that I love my body. That took longer of doing what most people do in this journey is appreciation and wearing clothes that fit that I liked versus all the tricks we do with hiding our bodies or wearing things that we don't like or that are too small to remind ourselves to try to lose weight. I stopped doing all those things. And again, this was long before I started professionally working. Every time I saw myself in the mirror, I would like basically thought stop some of the negativity. At this point, I would tell clients, every time you see yourself in a reflection, work on building some space and neural pathways in your brain to have a gear for your body is acceptable, and then after that, beautiful. The first thing you would start doing is like you would say, "Hello, gorgeous," or "Hello, goddess," or "beautiful," or whatever words that you can manage to speak to yourself. The cool thing about that exercise is that you don't have to believe it because all you're trying to do is build new neural pathways that allow you to have room for that in your brain because your subconscious doesn't judge or second guess you. If you were to say, "Oh gosh, Tracy, your legs are so gross," your subconscious will say, "Yes, boss, okay," and of course then you're going to have uncomfortable feelings from that. But if there's a neural pathway that you start getting on with, like, "Hello, gorgeous."
But isn't that a little steep? Somehow I find it harder to, go to the other extreme and say, "Hi, gorgeous." I'm like, my subconscious goes, "Are you nuts?"
Well, that's gorgeous. Your subconscious isn't that part because the subconscious isn't going to like question you. It's just like, "Okay, yes, boss." Now our conscious brain that has all this conditioning of like, of course my body can't be gorgeous. I have cellulite. What are you talking about? And when you hear that, it's like, yeah, I hear you. I get it. That's my conditioning. And that's all you're trying to do is actually start to build some dialogue of stopping the chronic, like autopilot negativity.
Yeah, and maybe with a little neutrality, one could just say, that is me today, and it's okay. Because then that doesn't cause any resistance because it's the truth. Right.
That's absolutely right. So, again, that exercise is just for some people that, like, even will try the neutrality and, like, Sometimes to elicit a bigger response, I'll do that. It doesn't mean you have to do that way first. It could be I can digest saying, here's me today, and I can go with that. That's perfect. There's not a right way for any of this.
All right. So that's what you did when you gained weight. You didn't mind that much, so you just...
Oh, I hated it. I gained weight initially, and then I stayed at a higher weight for a little bit. I did level out a little bit later with more intuitive eating and less of some of the deprivation-driven eating. I didn't have a lot of change, though. I didn't like it. It took me a long time to be okay. First, it was like, I don't like this, but I'm willing to... I want a saner life, so I'm willing to, like, be with it, even though I don't like it. And then it comes to the place where you start to see, like, for me, if things are so experiential personally, and probably many of us too, it's okay, so I'm living some life and some things are happening and they're not so bad, and oh, my body wasn't connected to that. It started to disconnect the idea that, like, I can only be happy, or good things can only happen, or people will only accept me if I look a certain way. And I'm going to say that in the context of, I do have some privilege going on. Like, for me, recovery wasn't that I went from a place and I was a lot bigger. I don't live in a big body in the world. So I do know that this conversation takes on a whole new level of learning how to navigate the world in a bigger body. I didn't have to experience all that, even though I experienced obviously so much internalized, hatred, to be honest. Yeah. But I do recognize and talk about this daily, that it's not fair. It's awful to have to walk around in a culture that, like, doesn't like your body for no good reason.
And stigmatizes people that have
bigger bodies. And have bigger bodies. So, I talk about that a lot, that I don't pretend to know what it's like to walk around in a bigger body, but I do know that the path is the same for us all in terms of self-care and body acceptance, and just recognizing that, we've all been made to believe the same thing, and so it harms all of us. Even though I know if you live in a bigger body in the world, you do have to face more stuff. Whether it's just outright people criticizing you, or medical stigmas, bias. It happens. I talk with people every day that it does happen, and some of the battle is, for me and some of my clients, let's find you a good doctor. Even if we go through 10, we're going to find one that's not so weight prejudice. And that's what we're doing.
Perfect. That's the way to help people, I think, because it's awful what is going on, and I think it's going in the wrong direction. Even now, it's getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know, maybe in Switzerland we're behind with things a little bit, but now it's getting, I don't know, we're probably going in the same crazy direction as you all did, like with the war on obesity and everything. Yeah. It hurts my soul, really it does. And especially because I was chubby and fatter as a kid and as a teenager until my early 20s. And that just sticks. It just cuts to the core. And that doesn't help anything, no matter what it is. But certainly that's not the way to, treat anyone. It's just not okay. And that's why I'm doing this work. And just yesterday I talked to my therapist about thinking about shifting my whole mindset from, up until now, I was just, every step I took or every kilo that came back on, I was afraid of, and I hated it. And just yesterday, we just talked about it. It isn't sort of implemented already, but I just had the idea that why don't I make it like the goal? Like this whole catastrophe thinking that you mentioned. Somehow we can get the steam out of this whole fear, at least to a certain degree, so that we can move on and not get stuck or fall back, which I think is helpful. And I just tried and played with the idea of actually turning it around and saying to myself, it's my goal to heal my body, and it will be as big or small or whatever it is as it wants to be. And then I can tick this off as a success. If I don't exercise too much, I get to tick off the box and pat myself on the back and say, wow, you did well today. And not, oh, I'm not sure, maybe I shouldn't, just turn the goal around a little bit, maybe.
I mean, I think is really beautiful, because it sounds like you are at a place where it's like you want freedom more than you want thinness. And what that brought up for me as you're talking about this is the idea of we want thinness for all the things we think it's going to give us. Success, confidence, love,
acceptance.
And I recognize, like, oh my gosh, like, why can't I go out, like, start to cultivate that? That's what I really want anyway. And so that's where that total inner journey starts to happen around when you start decoding, like, your thin desires, or when you feel fat. I feel fat as always I feel uncomfortable. What's going on? And it's always some feeling or circumstance that we're really struggling with. And what we're looking for is a way to feel more
in the moment.
Yeah, well, in the moment, I mean, we want to be more present. But when we're feeling, let's say, anxious, what we want is to feel soothed or peaceful or calm or supported. Let's look to that. Like, how can I get those things versus making it about the food and body talk? Instead of, like, counting calories or getting on the scale or whatever it is we're doing or what our mode is, why don't we, like, look at that and see where I can get with that and what support I can get with that and building up. Because once you start taking, like, the diet mentality or the sort of eating, when you're starting to work on this, a lot of people, I don't even like the word resistance, because it's, to me, an indication of, like, this is my safety, this is my protection. If you take it, I have nothing. So, we have to start plugging in those holes of, like, what will fill you up or what will help you feel more safe to where you just don't need this as much.
And what do you fill it with?
And what do you fill it with, which would be the things you're wanting. What popped to my mind doing a decoding session with somebody was, I was a young woman, and this happens a lot. These young women will come to college and they'll start a degree that they just don't really want to be in, but they think they should because that's what they think a parent may or may not or may want, or it may be real that that's what the parent wants them to do. So anyway, I'll have these women come in, and there's all these moments like, I feel fat and I can't eat my meal plan, or I restricted this day, even though some days I'm good at intuitive eating, and you'll see their how everything goes to the language of food and body. So they'll be in a mode of kind of being okay at breakfast, and by the afternoon they're thinking about how they're going to restrict dinner. And I'll say, what was happening before that? And they'll start to recognize, oh, well, I was in my class, and then I had this thought, and the teacher said this thing, and then I had this memory of disappointing her, and then I got scolded, and they're projecting some stuff onto the circumstance. I'm going to fail, and then nobody will love me. And so we started looking at, well, what is it you're really looking for? Oh, I just want understanding and support. Oh, so you're telling me
in some
safety.
Way.
There's a need for, like, expression, and the way that most of us have been expressing those put away, stuffed away, and allowed experiences or feelings is through the food language, so.
Do you find you can always tie it back to an incident that happened immediately before we sort of make bad comments about our bodies, or can it be a trauma that is long ago? It
can be both. It can be both. So sometimes you'll have just overriding, like for me, I used to remember, like, adrenaline and anxiety feeling like I had 10,000 fluorescent lights over my body at all times.
Yeah.
And so it was just this humming of, like, I'm not okay.
Exactly.
And so the more you start to slow down and recognize where you maybe are safe and where you are okay in the present, that can start to bring that down and therefore get more present with your food. Sometimes it's like overarching just feelings that you're just running from. And then sometimes it's, just situational things that have just happened. And you mentioned trauma. That's a lot of reason why I think that people struggle so much with disordered eating and chronic dieting behaviors, is because that definitely is, oh my gosh, like a placeholder or a way that you can slow things down or keep yourself preoccupied. Because I have so many clients that the moment they start eating, they start feeling.
Yep.
And they don't want to feel those frozen pockets in their bodies, because somatically we store our emotions in our bodies. And so when you get to a certain place, maybe fullness wise, that will start to feel like old things all over again, even though it's not those times, it feels like it, because your nervous system is still on high alert, looking for a threat to, like, run from or freeze from or fight from, So all that stuff has to be addressed. But the food and body talk is always a clue. Like, hey, okay, so we know that, like, rationally, this apple or this piece of bread or this whatever, this piece of cheese isn't going to make you fat. But I know that that's what's happening. So let's look at that. What feels like too much right now? And they might say, oh, I don't know. And so you have to just keep going gently and more deeply, as much as tolerated, to what's happening. So decoding a lot of things is just as much a part of intuitive eating and body image work, because we think about, like, the body image stuff, it is, cultural. We're taught to, like, want to be smaller and more contained and all those kind of things. But there also could be a reason of other things and safety for that too. So that's why these situations are, not everybody fits in the same categories and has all the same story, but it can end up in the same place. So, once we start getting down there a little deeper, you'll see, like, it's like I can, like, totally, like, tell the culture to, like, F off. I mean, I don't buy into it anymore, but my body, it still feels like I have to be a certain way. So, that's just not so much a head thing. It's more about, like, I need some more tending with healing some stuff.
I think that's the thing that keeps people from, quote unquote, succeeding at this is because they don't have the right counseling or therapy or even an RD that is by their side. Because when that stuff comes up, certainly I had an alcoholic mother and a very traumatic past, but I thought I was always congratulating myself for not being an alcoholic and for not having turned to drugs or anything. But I didn't realize that my coping mechanism totally was dieting, restricting, worrying about my body, over-exercising to the point of exhaustion, anything. Just I put all my self-hate and my insecurities, everything in the body image box. And so, of course, it didn't help, when I just read intuitive eating. I was like, I see your point, but I can't do it. So, and that's where I see a lot of people start to block it and fall back. And I have a lot of compassion for that, because they couldn't possibly go further because the underlying issues are not addressed, and you can't just do it on your own.
No, I would say that for me, I did more of the emotional piece later, after the food got much better. And even the little pieces emotionally clean up even further little pockets of food stuff that I was lurking in the shadows or whatever. But I think intuitive eating is definitely difficult to do fully on your own. I think you can get far with just the resources that are out there, like the books and everything. But I do think that you can't, it's really, really, I don't know too many people who have gotten truly, truly, truly free without help. It's not because people could be lacking trying hard enough. It's just that there are some pockets that sometimes they're hidden for a reason. We did that for a purpose, to feel safe. Exactly. So there's nothing like, oh, I can't get this, so it doesn't work. There's more, and it's okay. Yeah.
It's especially when I talk to people like Virgie Tovar or, any other fat activists like that, the way she experienced, at one point, she realized in one particular situation, I can be happy right now, and I can feel like a goddess, and I can be treated like a goddess if I want to right now. And there's no need to go the whole detour for 20 years dieting and over-exercising or, the whole cycle. We could shortcut the way to happiness, and it sort of clicked inside with me, like, I'm running after a carrot. What is hiding behind that? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about as well, because I don't know where I read this, but dieting and food problems or disordered eating is often symbolic for our relationship to a whole lot of other things, like our relationship to money, our relationship to love, pleasure. And for me, what hit home the most was trust. Like, the way I behave around food can be mirrored toward how I trust the world, how I trust myself, how I trust my body, how I am around a lot of stuff, like the black and white thinking, the everything or nothing, or I trust myself, I'm fully confident and I'm nobody. I recognize that there's so much we can read if we try and read our relationship to food in our bodies, there's so much stuff hiding behind that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, what's your take on that?
Oh, that's core to my work in terms of everything that's happening on your plate is going on in your life in some way. And
Can you make an example as well?
Yeah. So let's say somebody's food is really, you're always watching your food. And you might see that in somebody who's always watching everybody and how they react to them and how they morph themselves into what they think people would want to get good, positive regard. And so when I look at that, I see like the watching on the food and making it look perfect and acceptable to whatever the cultural ideal is at the moment. They're doing the same thing with how they're relating with people. And if you look deeper to that, to the core, is like when we're watching and morphing ourselves and feeling into what we think people might need or want to give us like feedback that we're good and okay, is a sign of like, I don't feel good and okay. I'm feeling pretty worthless.
Exactly.
And it will come out through the food. It will come out through maybe the things we do in our work or our school or whatever. And food, I mean, you could, like you said, you could choose anything. You could choose money or relationships or whatever. In our case, the food is a doorway in to becoming who we really are. Not fixing ourselves and being something we're not or transforming. It's like we're in there. It's just that we had to like put ourselves away because it felt like too unsafe to do it.
Yeah, and it starts with being curious instead of judgmental about it, I think. One point that really hurt me was to see, I mean, I studied with Brené Brown for a semester, and there was something about foreboding joy. And at first I went like, why would anyone, not let themselves feel joy? And then it suddenly hit home extremely hard. Like, wow, whenever I feel happy or joyful or light inside, like carefree almost, there's something inside of me that goes, the other shoe will drop. Watch out. Watch out. You can't, I don't want to know how good it can feel because it will turn black any minute now. Right. And then I have this catastrophe thinking again, and then I cannot live the moment of joy.
Yeah, that's actually really common, I think, and probably people listening, is that I'm pretty geared. I can do shame. I can do sadness. But exactly. An edge for me is like, just joy and play and this is some background that will make sense in like the evolution of an eating disorder, at least for me, is like if your background is you don't really do much feelings, especially ones that are intense, and the mode is like always be accomplishing and working, there's no room for that. The shoe would drop, literally. Yeah. And so when I start to hit those places, this is still something I personally work on. That's actually been the last 2-year journey for me, is like really like being in it when I feel it and trying to like it. Sometimes I just override it and because I can't tolerate it. And then there'll be times where I can be with it and it feels pretty good, but it feels just kind of weird just to be happy.
Feels weird, yes. It feels like a fear of hate somehow, looking down somewhere and going, wow, something about this is not right.
You're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, I think it has to be a self-worth sort of thing, because somehow deep inside, maybe it's an underlying belief of, I don't deserve this. I don't know anyone who's really, really, really good at joy, so I can't even make an example. And if even Brené Brown talks about this from her own experience, I figure, all right, I'm probably not the only one who has trouble with this.
You're not the only one. I love talking about it really transparently, because it's like, that's still an edge for me of I can do it, but it's a little wobbly sometimes.
And I felt shame when I found out that I have it, because I thought, what? You're even afraid of being joyful? What the hell is wrong with you? And then okay, this is that again, as we started out, like, it's so good to finally realize that we're not alone in all of our insecurities, whether they manifest in eating disorders or in workaholism or alcoholism or shopping addiction, whatever it is, there's something there that talks to us. And I know from myself, sometimes I just, close my ears and go, la, la, la. I don't want to hear it because it hurts. But that's where the healing is. And that's where I think a lot of the books or a lot of the anti-diet talk falls short because it doesn't address that. I mean, it can't address everything, but
right.
That's a stumbling block for a lot of people. It certainly is for me. Like, I can't just eat what I want because something deep inside goes, no, it's not safe somehow.
Right,
A lot of stuff comes up. So I think I'm not the only one in this either. So I think it's good to talk about it because it's a delicate topic and people don't really want to talk about it. They don't really want to talk about the mess. And I sort of do mess. I mean,
I think that's the gift of us who are sensitive, as well as, my gear's shame, so I can go there with you. I get it. Yeah. I'm not afraid of your shame. And being able to have your platform here to talk about, we do shame. It's all good. Come on over.
Exactly.
That's what a huge portion of people who are on this journey need to hear, so they can be more okay for them. Okay, now I can look at this because I'm not going to be shamed for my shame. I'm not going to be told to suck it up. I'm not going to be told to suck it up to just fix your food and just eat intuitively and you'll be fine. And I know that nobody said it like that, but there's that another piece. There's intuitive eating, which is freedom, and learning to be less hating and then good and then loving in the skin you're in is good. And, rejecting the diet mentality and rejecting that you have to be thin to be happy. And there's also this piece of not rejecting how you feel.
Yeah, but sometimes it's just really hard. It depends on how intense the feelings are. Sometimes I can be a real queen at it, and sometimes I find myself running, For
me, it's I don't have time for this.
I have shit to do.
And then I say, oh, yes. Okay, let's drop in. I know when I'm on warp speed, I'm avoiding. Let's slow down. Let's do it.
How do you get through to your clients? Because when I talk to people, I often run into a certain amount of resistance to these topics because no, they don't have shame. No, they don't have insecurities. And no, they need to diet. So it's that I can't get through. So how do you crack the shell of someone so that they feel safe?
So sometimes when they're telling me I have to lose weight to be okay, I'm let's say more about that. What is it that will be okay? And usually when you start people talking about that aspect of it versus pushing against my agenda, which is I think you could be free if you're an intuitive eater and you like your body. And I'm no, I can't be free because then I won't be happy. Well, tell me what you think will be better if you were thinner. And then what? And what will start to come up inevitably is they're human and they have feelings. So you're feeling if you lost weight, you'll feel more acceptable or whatever it is. It'll be a story and it'll be their story and they'll see it pretty quickly oh, there's emotion there, huh? They might not like it or want to go there, but at least you've opened it up to it's not really just about the size difference. It's that, and it's hard because you're trying to help them see you've got this culture that reinforces all that, and then you've got your own life and your own experiences that meet that. So of course it feels and all the advertising says if you want to be successful, happy, blah blah blah, you have to be thin. So of course that will fix all my problems that I don't really know that I have. So just open it up really gently and a little bit, and doesn't mean that they're going to bite that day, but maybe they're more willing and curious maybe by the fifth conversation, so and we all just kind of work on the piece that you don't have to do the hardest stuff first. I mean, a lot of people come to see me and the food stuff isn't as hard, it's the body image is harder, so we go there. And you want to feel good, you want to see yourself be little bits more free, so we do that. You don't have to do everything at once and address everything at once and make everything about let's get to the deepest, darkest thing right now. We don't need to do that. We can only go as quickly as the slowest parts of us can go.
Yeah, my therapist often tells me that when I'm let's dig deeper here. I want to get rid of that. And she said, no, your soul will provide the trauma when it is ready. All you have to do is take care of yourself, self-care, and try and be nicer to yourself. And then when your soul feels safe, it will bring up the next package. So it comes in steps. And I always had the attitude, I have to get this down. I have to do this perfectly, and this has to be solved now. And that's my entire attitude with a lot of things. And she was right about so many things, but I only now, like 1.5 years later, I find myself telling her, when you said that to me like a year ago, I thought, no way, I can't do this, and I don't want to do this, and I don't even understand. And now all of a sudden, effortlessly, little things are happening in my life, and I observe it. I'm like, half a year ago, I wasn't capable of doing that. And now I'm just sort of doing something new without punishing myself to do it or making it a goal that has to be achieved. It just starts shifting, and it feels like an entire cruise liner that slowly shifts course.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is about. This work is about, is challenging a little bit, integrating a little bit, and the next thing always appears. So you don't have to you don't have to force anything. It's just the willingness to keep showing up and being compassionate and curious and courageous. And that's your ingredients.
It's just like one step in front, one foot in front of the other. Absolutely. You talked about decoding just some minutes before, and I read that you do symbolic decoding. What exactly is that?
It's just looking at the food for what it's actually. It's like, here's the food, but what is the food? So it's just what we talked about earlier around, like, let's say that I have a person and they are. Just trying to think of somebody in mind here. They're wanting to stop, let's say they're working and they're wanting to stop eating candy throughout the day at work. And they're recognizing, like, I'm not really that hungry for it, and I don't really always want to eat it, but I feel like I have to. And so what's the symbol of this candy here? What's going on? So what I'll have them do is just work through, what are the feelings prior to eating the candy? What are the sensations? Pretend like I'm an alien. I've never had Swedish fish. I don't know what they taste like. Walk me through like what to expect when I would eat this. And they'll say, oh, it's chewy and it's sweet. And they kind of get stuck, so it takes some time to get it out of my teeth. And I really like the yellow ones the best because they're a little more pop of flavor and citrusy, and I like that the best. And really having to go into detail of the food. And so I would ask, like, the first couple bites, especially of your yellow flavored ones, what is it you're noticing? What feelings get elicited as you do this? And it will always be like, and so even the body language, I can hear it and see it of like, it's relief, and that was fun, and it was playful, and I got to fiddle with it longer because it gets stuck in my teeth, so it's a fun distraction. And then immediately a person will usually like, oh, I'm just trying to have some more fun, aren't I? I'm like, yeah, that's what you're doing. And you go through that with any food that feels like, you can do the opposite with restriction even. Like if you have a food that you just can't stop restricting and logically that it can't make you gain weight just on its own, but there's there's a block to it. So we'll just go there with some of those kind of things. And what we'll find is the feelings you're wanting, let's say it's play and joy, and I'll always ask, like, well, how often are you getting this in your life? And the answer is usually very little to none. And what things do you get that? And they'll have maybe one thing they do for fun every once in a while. So some of the self-care will be, let's try on some things, and also give yourself some kinesthetic, like, reminders of how you could have that. And maybe you need to have that in your office. Or obviously we're looking at, like, what's the job situation? To talk with your coach or therapist, whatever, about, like, is this something that needs to be shifted in some way, and really look at things, because they're probably not going to stop eating Swedish fish when they're not hungry. Not that that's a problem. We all do that for fun. That's not the issue. But when it's like chronically all the time, every day, and this was this woman's concern, and she knew it was emotional eating, that I don't really want to be doing this every day, but can't stop. We have to find some ways to fill those holes and gaps in life. Otherwise, we'll just continue to eat Swedish fish.
Yeah. So that in the end, it's a choice whether you want to, emotionally eat it. And sometimes you do it and sometimes you don't. Right. So you have a choice. Okay.
And what I find that when we do that, you take so much of the zip and the power out of the food, whether it's restricting or emotional eating. When do you have some awareness of like, oh, this is the point? Okay, I get it. Just trying to help myself here. I'm not trying to destroy myself. I get it. So how is it best I want to honor and serve myself today? And it's okay if I emotionally eat. Or even if I restrict, but you just recognize at some point there's no judgment. However, there is like, how much do you desire to move forward as well? So all those pieces have to go together. And for me, it's never like, okay, so now you have to stop emotional eating or stop restricting. It's, what do you want? Mm-hmm. What is it you desire? And we can get there, and we just got to keep going forward.
And where do you expect the most resistance with your clients?
Well, resistance I always look at as like, okay, so there's more to be said, and like even go a little deeper with that, because resistance is just like, I'm protecting myself, so don't take away my thing.
Exactly.
Don't take my thing, which is why I think people get so scared of especially coming to see me, because like food's the thing and I'm the food person. So this is why I try to talk a lot about like compassion, and I'm not taking anything away, but let's shine some light on it so you can know choicefully what's up. So resistance, I would say, that's a tough one. I mean, I think the hardest part for people is, like we talked about earlier, the body acceptance. Like I think that most people don't want to like not eat foods they like. Yeah. And I think that people don't really want to eat till they're so like nauseous that it feels terrible. I don't think people really want those things. I mean, they might say like, oh, I love the high of restricting, or I love feeling like totally zoned out, and I'd rather feel the pain of my physical sickness and fullness than feel my depression. I mean, that happens. But I think that people also do, it's a double thing, because okay, so now you're already emotionally in pain, but now you're physically in pain, and you don't have to have both. So at some point there's a willingness to like, let's look at the food a little more deeply and see what little bits I might be able to work with to let go of. But I think all of us, myself included, I just can't make my body into whatever I think it should be to hopefully earn some cultural brownie points. I think that's the hardest part for everybody, no matter what their size is, because it's such currency. It's hard to let go of like, I could do this thing, and at least externally on the surface, I'll probably have some acceptance. That's a hard one to say, like, I'm going to let that go.
Yeah, because we all had this experience of, being applauded for having lost mm-hmm. weight, as if it was a real mm-hmm. achievement of honor. So it's hard to let that go. I often hear people saying that we have to grieve this ideal that we have, and that's where I get questions like, how do you mean? Like, am I supposed to sit here and cry? It sounds like a blatantly stupid question, but what is grieving this ideal mean? Like saying goodbye to all these congratulations that I got when I lost weight, or mm-hmm. what exactly is it about? Was it like when I gave away my 12 pair of super cool Pepe jeans that I simply had grown out of? Was that part of the process as well? Or what does grieving that mean?
Yeah, you said it. All those things. Those are all parts of that. It's grieving that, it's easier to like live on the surface. And it's easier because that's kind of way, again, it's you see how everything's about something else. So like the food and body image things, it's like we can do that, and you will. There's a little bit of like, it's just kind of easier to get along and flow with like what everybody else is doing, because that's what they think. It's harder to be like, how am I doing? And do I agree with this? Do I want to take in this? Does this work for me? I mean, to constantly doing that with everything you do, that takes like focus. Mm-hmm. And so
that's why those who do it are badasses.
You're doing it and I'm doing it, and we're all doing it in our ways. So it's like, I do tell a lot of clients, like, do I have like a huge gaggle of female friends? No, because it's just not comfortable because of like the body stuff and the ways that women will bond over. And I'm not making them wrong or bad. I get it, been there. So it's not that. It's just that I can't live sanely and freely and be who I am if that's my constant influence. Mm-hmm. And so that's the choice that I've made, and doesn't make it easy. It would be easier just like, yeah, it would be easier, but it
like
doesn't
a sheep just going mm-hmm. with the masses. Yeah.
So imagine you're grieving that. You're grieving like a automatic conversation starter. Let's talk about how like I'm on my next diet, or
Yeah, I shouldn't have eaten that, and
which I don't.
Blah blah.
Yeah,
blah.
I shouldn't have eaten that. That's like automatic. Like, hey, we can bond right now. We're doing this thing.
So
And the
tragic.
thing is, it is. And again, I don't want to make. This is not about making women particularly wrong. It's just that this was the construct that we got served up, and recognizing but this isn't really serving me and being empowered and sovereign. So
Yeah, I don't
I'm
want
not
to
going to do it.
participate. Yeah.
I don't want to participate. But that's a grieving, because it's like, you're doing your own thing, and so you're not going to be quite as always supported in that. And that's not easy. We are supported in that. We have this group, like you and I and other people doing that, but it's not like I can walk into Publix and say that and 10 people won't look at me like I'm an alien. Mm-hmm. Or it's the grocery store and do that. I will experience that. And I'm okay with that because of what I get in return, which is freedom. But you are grieving that automatic thing. You're grieving that it's not as easy to maybe go in certain stores and find whatever clothes you want to find. You're grieving that you can't maybe go to any doctor and feel like you're going to be treated for the thing you've got going on versus your body size.
Exactly.
That's a bitch because it's like you just want to go and get your antibiotics and have a good day, and it's, no, we got to talk about your weight and well, no.
Do you think it's ever going to change so that we sit down as women and we talk about changing the world instead of changing our ways?
Well, I think it's interesting that you say things feel like worse. I always wonder, does it feel like it's getting worse because there's more resistance, meaning not everybody's buying into it anymore? So that's my curiosity about, like, things feel like they're getting worse. You asked me if they're going to get better. I hope so. I'm not going to stop. So I don't know if my lifetime or my daughter's lifetime, I don't know, but this is what I'm here for, so this is what I'm going to do. I don't think I have another option. So
yeah. I'm with you.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. And I'm just going to keep doing me and helping whoever I can in my little sliver or corner of the universe here. And if it's one person or small groups at a time, that's good. That's good for me.
And I think it's always important to also educate people about, the sinister mechanism of diet culture and the industries behind it and how much money they're making of us feeling inappropriate or less than, because that sort of evolves into awakening our inner rebel, and that helps. Like, oh no, F that. I'm not going with that anymore.
Right.
And you sort of need that anger as well and seeing through the things. So that's an important thing for me to keep going. Like, I don't want to be a sheep. I read recently a quote that I really loved. It's like a lioness doesn't give a crap about the opinion of sheep. Like, what? I don't need to do what the whole horde of sheep are doing if I want to be a lioness, because I see through the mechanisms. That helps me, that inner rebel, because sometimes, as you said, it feels really lonely also. Like, I'm swimming upstream. Anybody coming along? No,
right.
no. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love it. I look on social media, like in the last 10 years, it keeps growing, the groups and the people you're doing this podcast with your time. I mean, you're not like going to make $1 gazillion doing this, but this is like,
none.
We know that's what, zero. This is what's necessary to, I just feel like help us be a little, more free and more sane and connected, so is it going to get better in that way? When I think about that, yes, because there's so many more people now that don't feel so alone. So maybe we've already done like what we got to do and everything else is just icing. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important. Just the little steps. Yeah. Every woman that wakes up and starts the journey is one less that is drinking the diet culture Kool-Aid. So I think it's good. If someone wants to work with you or have your coaching, how can they find you?
Yeah, just go to my website. It's Tracy with just a Y, TracyBrownRD.com. And they can sign up for my free gift, which just kind of gives you the beginnings of some intuitive eating work and some decoding work, just like a little, 30-something page guide that at least kind of educates you on how to do it and the start of it and why it's important. If people want to go to my Facebook, it's Tracy Brown RD. And then I am going to do actually a group 6-month coaching pretty soon. I don't have all the dates and details, but again, you can find it through my newsletter. And it's going to be pretty much every single thing we talked about in like just a weekly themes instruction form, but in a group setting where we can do lots of interaction on Facebook, and I'll be doing audios and videos and all that. So that's the group way, and obviously that's going to be a very economical way for people that need the help, as well as my one-on-one stuff. So yeah, everything can be found on my website or Facebook. I'm pretty active on both, and it's just, if it's not me, find somebody else. I mean, don't let your life slip by and wait. Because it's later. I remember my eating disorder voice said, "Okay, well, you'll make up for your breakfast later." Well, later never happened.
Yeah.
So that's my advice. Like, don't wait, because it's not too bad, and you're not too old or too young. It's time to get on with getting yourself free to be who you are.
Yeah. It's never too late to be liberated, I think. Mm-hmm. I will link to your website in the show notes of this episode at lifeunrestricted.org in the podcast section. And now it's time for my final question that I ask all of my guests, and it is, what would you like to be remembered for?
Oh my gosh, I'm really trying to sink into that. I have words, but not a complete sentence. Like, all these little feeling words come up. So my thought is that I want to be remembered for being fully myself and being fully alive, whatever that is, even through the mess. And I feel like me, who's being, everything you've heard today is 100% me in terms of like the passion and the compassion. And I think that's it, is like, being authentic, getting to show my daughter that she can be a woman growing up in a world like that. And that's what this is for too. So men or women listening to this, I guess I want to be known for just, I will never stop trying to be who I really am.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think, and all I aim to do here is like show with, like, again, my compassion and my passion and my experience. Like, all of these things that we talk about are totally available, and you're freeing yourself in whatever time it takes. And it's not a waste of time. It's your freedom.
Yes, it is. That's a good last sentence. And I think that's what we all need, to just hear it again and again, and have someone who brings hope into our brains and that we can keep going. So it's a pleasure talking to you, Tracy. Thank you. Oh
my gosh, it was such an honor. You're wonderful, and I'm so glad you gave me the opportunity just to have conversations, not to even, I just like, this is important, just to be with each other and be ourselves and learn from each other. And that's what's healing. The relationship is what's healing.
It was a really good conversation. Thank you. And have a good day.
You too.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome, make sure to subscribe, and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.